Our article aims to explore whether it is actually the case that threats are as unethical as the actual unethical acts, and also to explore whether there might be legitimate uses of threats of use of force. Our conclusion is nuanced but largely affirmative of the thesis that threats of use of force are often problematic along with the acts one threatens, and maybe in more ways than we initially think of. For instance, if you are to threaten something, you also have to prepare yourself to do it. If you are to threaten with nuclear weapons, you have to build them and maintain them. Does that also increase the danger that they will be used? But at the same time, we do not rule out that threats or threat-like statements can sometimes be just and useful. Our article delineates how threats can be characterized as different sorts of speech acts. And I won't go into detail on that now. Greg will deal with a few more of those. But if we are to use some of this technical language, technical terminology, we can say that a threat, properly speaking, combines what we call a directive and a commissive. That means we actually want to direct some sort of action or maybe avoid it. We want to tell someone, do this rather than that. And we also commit ourselves to doing something if this does not happen. That's the standard formula of a threat. If it is said unconditionally, we'll actually do it anyway, then the directive part of the threat is really pretty weak. You know, we'll catch you dead or alive, whether you want to or not. But if it is conditional, you may do something to avert this. Unless you do this, I will do that. Or unless you stop doing that, I will have to do this. Well, then you have a choice. As I said, Greg will go further into this, but what we're talking about then is conditional threats, and these require intentionality. The threatener intends to achieve something by this, and the way in which the other party acts in response will influence the way in which the threatener achieves it. The final point that I'll make before giving the floor to these other eminent gentlemen is that the sort of speech act that I've just described, where you threaten to perform some harmful act unless a person or group of persons does not or does something, is it necessarily immoral? Clearly not. Domestic law does this all the time, doesn't it? Unless you pay your taxes, we may compel you to pay either them or a fine or suffer a penalty. And we all think that's okay. But key to the legitimacy of such a threat is the legitimacy of the authority formulating the threat. And the threat must also be proportionate and predictable and credible. If the government, for instance, threatens automatic incarceration without trial, or they threaten loss of life for the late payment of taxes, we would clearly find ourselves outside of legitimate coercion. Likewise, if neighborhood posses, I like that term, the posse, gather the posse, took on the job of enforcement, or if the demands were totally unpredictable and changed all the time, such that what was allowed one day was suddenly severely punished the next, we would say that the threats are illegitimate. And these are the kinds of things that we try to delineate, because we believe that these things do happen in international diplomacy all the time, not least the lack of proportionality and the lack of predictability and credibility.